Okay, guys, I wanted to give you a quick lesson on composite limits and show you a few examples, and then I'll turn you loose on some good problems here. So I wanted to remind you about compositions of functions and composites and exactly how they work. Remember a problem like this, if you're looking at finding f of g of 4. So remember that we're going to take 4 and we're going to plug that into the inner function first. Okay, and then we're going to get an output there. So like if I just go to this graph right here, plug in a 4 and I get 6. Okay, so 6 is my output. Now that output becomes my input for the f function. So when I plug in a 6 here, I've got a hole, and I get 4. So that goes into f function, and I get 4. So the big step here is right there is where your output becomes your input, or your range becomes your domain. So now if you start to think limits, the way it's going to work is when I find a limit value, that limit value is now going to become my x. So we would say as x approaches that value. Okay, so a little bit different way of thinking, but for this one here, f of g of 4, it equals 4. Okay, so let's look at this limit. So for this one, we're going to find the limit of g as x approaches 4. Okay, so using this graph right here, the limit of g as x approaches 4 would be 6. Okay, now we find the limit of f as x approaches 6. Remember the limit value. We got the limit value, so now that becomes the x. So as x approaches 6. Okay, so go up here to the f function, and you would see as x approaches 6, oh, wait a second. Okay, so that limit does not exist. All right, so how you handle this is we can start to look for one-sided limits. Okay, so this limit does not exist as x approaches 6. So now let's start to look at one-sided limits. So go back to the limit of g as x approaches 4. Now remember that the output becomes my input. So if I look at this, you see how this graph is bounded above. Okay, so this graph is approaching 6 from below, and it stays below. So it's approaching 6 from below. So let's take that 6 and just make that from below. So we'll go down here, and instead of saying from below, we'll find the limit of f as x approaches 6 from the left, is what that becomes down here. Okay, so go back to the f function, and as x approaches 6 from the left, your limit is 1. Okay, let me show you. I'm going to send you this sheet, so you got this sheet as well. I want to talk about, show you some more just kind of weird examples. I want to start right here with number 2. So here I'm going to find the limit of g. Can you see it there? There it is. the limit of g as x approaches 2. Okay. So that does not exist. So now let's look at it. So we would instantly go to one-sided limits. So let's look at it as x approaches 2 from the left. As x approaches 2 from the left, we would get 1. And then the limit